My heart didn't sing when I was selling Coke Zero. Great brand. Loved it. Loved working with it. My heart didn't sing when I was selling Hershey's Kisses. Hershey's Kisses are fantastic. They're wonderful. I enjoyed those things, but to have that individual move from A to B, have an insight that made a difference in their life, their career, their relationship, gosh, put me there. Put me on the front line for that. I'm all in.
Decades of leading Fortune 500 teams taught him one lesson: how you lead matters more than what you do. Preston Poore is a leadership trainer who helps leaders turn practical strategies into real transformation. We'll explore building confident leadership without shortcuts and turning hard-won lessons into daily practices. This isn't just information, it's transformation. By the end, you'll see how shifting focus from tasks to people changes everything. Preston, welcome to Seek, Go, Create.
Hey, Tim. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad you're here too. And as we hit record, we realize we're not far away from each other. We should have done this face to face.
Yeah. Stone's throw away right here in Georgia. That's great.
I know, Marietta, Georgia. That's where I was born.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So you're a native. There aren't many native Atlantans. And I
Yeah.
share something with you very similar. I was born in Atlanta. I was born actually at Piedmont Hospital down in North Atlanta many moons ago.
Yeah, my wife was born down at Georgia Baptist, which I don't think it's that anymore. I think it's something else.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I came home from the hospital the day JFK was shot. I don't remember it, and I didn't have anything to do with it, I don't think.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Conspiracy theories might be coming out, right?
So anyway, man, glad. Yeah, Marietta, spent some time there, still have relatives there, and great spot here in the Atlanta area. So, Preston, the question I like to start with is kind of one of two things. I'll give you a choice. Would you rather answer, what do you do, or who are you? Pick it and answer. There's not a right or wrong answer here.
What if I don't like either one? Can we move on
Go
to
ahead.
the next question? Is
Yeah,
that okay?
you
Question 2. Go.
All right, next question. What's
You
your favorite
know,
ice cream?
You know why I like, thanks. You know why I like this, Tim? Great question to ask, because often when we introduce ourselves to other people or we're asking other people, we ask them about their job. And people talk about that. I know I'm sure you're very familiar with that, and hence the question on it. Who am I? I am a guy that's married to a beautiful woman for almost 34 years. She went to the University of Alabama. I came to the Southeast after being in Colorado for a number of years, looking for my Scarlett O'Hara. And believe it or not, I found her. Doesn't mean I'm Clark Gable or anything, but she is the Scarlett O'Hara. I've got 2 great kids. 31-year-old daughter that lives in Manhattan, New York, and is married and has her first child. And my son, Benton, and his wife, Emma, live here in the Atlanta market. So I'm first and foremost a family guy. I'm a faithful guy. I've been a believer since I was a young kid. That shapes, molds everything that I do, my worldview, my behaviors. Actually, I'm not great at behavior often, but I try. So those are the things I think that who I am. And if you want to talk values or personality traits or character, those types of things. But when people ask me, and often too, it's kind of funny, Tim, I forget when I introduce myself, I forget my family. I bounce through and tick off all the things that I've done, my resume, and said, oh yeah, I've got my wife and kids. We are in the Atlanta area. I need to put those up top.
Yeah. And I know you spent time in corporate. We're going to talk about that, with one of the largest, most well-known brands that exist, especially for those in the Atlanta area. Coca Cola is famous, but it is kind of typical that we, and especially men, I'll say men more often than not, lean into the what you do and rattle off the titles and the accomplishments and things like that. And I know you've been through a journey to kind of move beyond that quite a bit, but why do you think it is that we migrate to that what you do description title thing? Because I know you did that at one point too, right?
No, easily. I think it's the path of least resistance. I think it's what you're taught, and you model that behavior. How do you introduce yourself to somebody? How do you ask them when you're in a networking situation? What's the first question you ask them? Typically, what do you do? And that's where we drive often their identity. Then we start to compare and say, okay, well, then I start to subconsciously think about economic status and where do they live and all those things. And that's probably not the best place to start. But I think it's path of least resistance. I think it's a learned behavior, and it's hard to adjust, but I think that's the way most people handle it.
I think it's like it's just everybody expects it. And, when we answer something like you just did, because I forced you to do it by asking you a little bit of a different question, people will often kind of be perplexed because they're just not used to it.
Yeah.
I hate to say at times that I do wonder if we are just living sort of I hate to use the word superficial, because I do think there's value to telling people what you do. I don't think that's a bad thing, but I really do enjoy learning about people at a deeper level. And similar to you, I don't think I've always been that way.
Mm.
Early on in my career, hard charger, sounds like you were that way too. I'm about to ask you more details about that. And probably were rewarded for some of that, hard results driven type mindset. Tell me a little bit. You said you're born in Atlanta. Tell me a little bit about Preston, the growing up years that kind of led into your before you get to corporate. I just kind of want to know a little bit about the foundational
The
time so that we could kind of have fun with the journey here.
the formative years, huh?
Yeah.
I lived in a middle class neighborhood growing up in Fort Collins, Colorado. My dad is a college professor and also an entrepreneur. We could talk a little bit about that too, if you'd like. Went to Georgia Tech, so I think you did too. Is that correct? Yeah. So a Tech grad, Ramblin' Wreck, and having a heck of a football team right now too. Um, I grew up in Fort Collins, Colorado, and Colorado is a fantastic place to grow up. You think about all of the outdoor things that are there. I had skiing, I had the mountains, I had all that, and that was a lot of fun. I gave my life to the Lord when I was in 8th grade, and then I had some wonderful mentors around me all the way through high school. In high school, I figured out that I kind of wanted to figure out if I ever had a FOMO, Tim, actually, a fear of missing out. And that's when I went to the University of Colorado my freshman year. And I talk about this a little bit in my book. I share kind of a little bit about my journey on this. But uh, my freshman year, University of Colorado was the number one party school in Playboy magazine, which it had been for years. And I partook in all of that, right, and everything. And it led to me doing some things and transferring back to Colorado State University because my dad said I'm not paying for that, which I don't blame him at all. And graduated from CSU, was a Sigma Chi, which is in the fraternity there at CSU and a national fraternity. And my lifestyle was very different than my high school and younger years. And when I remember a night when I got sick and threw up actually on my Bible. And yeah, hard to hear, but it's kind of funny because I actually just leaned over on the bed and got sick, and that actually, and it was in a cover, so it was okay still, right? I had one of those covers, and that was a turning point for me because I thought, oh, something's not right. There's some incongruence here. That's not good. So I started doing this search on the inside, and I basically fled Fort Collins, left an ex girlfriend, left the situation there, and went to Alabama. The reason I went to Alabama is because of my relatives lived there, my grandparents, my dad's parents, cousins and stuff like that. So I had a network, a base there. And I started working in banking, believe it or not. I was what they call, Tim, I don't know if you've heard of this before, I was a must hire. And a must hire is where two guys meet in the country club and one says to the other, I've got a goofy nephew that's in town. He needs a job. Can you help him? And I started at AmSouth Bank in internal audit of all things, which is the only job I could find. And that was a miserable job, miserable experience. But actually, I met my wife at the bank a couple of years later. I married her. So that's kind of, I'll leave it there for a minute, but that's kind of where my formative years. It was really great childhood. Loved my parents, have a great, wonderful brother. But this journey that I went on was a kind of self sabotaging decisions that I made because of this FOMO, and then realizing that incongruence created a lot of challenges inside of me, internal churn. And I had to go figure out what that meant. And that's why I left Colorado to come to Alabama. And now we live in Georgia. So that's a little bit of the journey.
Our daughter's up in Colorado Springs. We spent some time up in Woodland Park, Colorado. That is a
Good.
beautiful, beautiful part of the country. And I do want to chime in. I Georgia Tech guy, but I married a Georgia girl.
Uh,
And I will say this, that I've got family from Mississippi. And if you want to find some absolutely beautiful women, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, those southern girls, they are quite impressive. we digress. That is not the topic
You
here.
digress. So,
But well, you digressed a little bit. You're the one that threw up on the Bible, so come on, man.
I love it. I'm with you. I'm
So there's a couple things that I wanted to dig just a little bit
Yeah,
more on.
sure.
The first was you say University of Colorado, number one party school,
Mhm.
Playboy, and all that kind of stuff. And you say it wasn't flippantly, but it also wasn't pridefully, and it wasn't necessarily apologetic. What was the decision? I mean, you were in Fort Collins, so you were close. It was a great school. It's in a beautiful setting in
Mhm.
Boulder there. But
Yeah.
do you recall what the decision process was? Because for me, I was just down the road from Georgia Tech, and I decided I want to be an engineer because the 4 out of the top 5
Yeah.
jobs in 1982 were engineers. And I went, oh, I'm okay in math. And I went down there. That may not have been the best decision either, but what was your decision process to
Mm.
go to University of Colorado? Was it that party school or was there something else?
It was, I think, maybe to get away from home. I grew up in a college town. I didn't want to be called a townie, if you will. If you go directly from high school in Fort Collins, just like Athens in
Yeah,
Georgia,
yeah, yeah.
you're
Mhm.
you're you're a townie, so I wanted to get away. That was the idea behind that, and I really didn't have any idea, Tim, what I wanted to do. I wish I had better direction. I went in as a psychology major. I think I changed my major 4 times in college, and that's been a pattern in my life, and I hate to tell you, I still don't know what I wanna be when I grow up, right, through all
Mhm.
of that.
Mhm.
But I very clearly remember my dad working with me and saying, "Okay, I'm a college professor. We're paying for this as a family for you to go down there. Your first semester, you got a here's the story on this. You got a 2 point I think it was 2.7, something like that. Not good, right? Not a good start." And dad said, "Okay, let's do the math. I'll support you if you can get a average for the year of 3.0." I said, "Okay, I think I can do that. I just got to get a 3.3, do the math, and I'll be fine." Well, as it turns out, I ended up getting a 3.2 the second semester. So you're a Georgia Tech grad, you can probably do it. That doesn't equal 3 when you divide it by 2, when you add those numbers together. So dad said, "Well, you made a commitment. I made a commitment. We had a deal. You're coming home." And believe it or not, I chose to live in my mom and dad's basement for those 3 years. Just because I didn't wanna have to go work and do all the other things. I was just there were some goofy things going on. But anyway, uh, but at the same time, I went back to Colorado State and got a business degree and finally figured out that I love business and I love the management side of it, the people side of it, and that's really what I did. But honestly, I still don't know what I wanna be. I never said, "Hey, this is a top 4 or 5 job that's out there." I never had that direction. And, consider yourself, Tim, honestly fortunate that you had that. Maybe that worked out for you or not, or your full
No,
story, but that's where
it
I
didn't.
landed on that. No?
I turned 62 yesterday and I'm still like going, huh, I wonder what I might do when I grow up or,
Yeah.
become something. I do think part of life is identifying things that you don't want to do.
Sure.
And that gains some clarity. And also, yeah, what's interesting. There's one other thing I want to mention here before we like jump fast forward to your career and things like that. I'm always intrigued, and to me, it's a bit of a dichotomy to have someone who's a college professor and an entrepreneur.
Mm,
Tell me more about your father,
mm.
and maybe any. Uh, I don't like throwing our parents under the bus, but maybe any positive and or negative that may be there because he was professor and entrepreneur all wrapped up in one.
Yeah, my dad and my family, we used to have a business called Numerica Corporation. Dad is an applied mathematics PhD from Caltech and an electrical engineer, so a brilliant man, and he got some patents and discovered some things about how to track objects in the sky. Fast forward 25 years, the company's technology sat on the president, or still sits, I think, on the president's desk in case of missile attack. And so he created a defense company. And then my brother jumped in to help him out and ran it for a number of years. And so dad was, and the thing was with CSU, he started all this as a mathematician. He had some students and they decided to enter a contest to solve a problem to get a grant to get money for it. He ended up getting best of breed from IBM all these years ago. I mean, he beat all these major organizations like Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Martin, everybody else. And boom, after that, that was the tipping point for him, and things took off. And we recently got out of the business last year and sold to an organization called Andrel, which is a major defense company in Orange County, California. But
Mhm.
dad's brilliant. I learned a lot of things from my dad. He's probably one of the ones that taught me something very simple that is from the book, How is Greater Than What You mentioned in the intro. He taught people are taught what to think, not how to think. They're taught what to think, but not how to think. And that's so important today in the AI, right? We've got a lot of what's out there. People don't have the critical thinking ability. They don't have the discernment. And dad was always big with me, asking me about what I thought about something. So yeah, I love my dad. I look up to him. He's one of my heroes, and amazing what he did as a college professor to transition into becoming an entrepreneur. And that journey for him was just an incredible one to watch, along with my family, my brother specifically. My wife worked at the company, my sister-in-law did, and just a wonderful American success story moving from acorn to oak tree, if you will.
Mm. Yeah, and I'll say this, and if there's nothing to it, don't worry about it. But darn, that's a pretty darn high bar to have someone as your father. I don't know if accomplished all that kind of stuff. Did that have anything to do with your pursuit of things as you started moving into your career at all?
Yeah, I think my dad always, I learned the value of hard work from him. My
Mm.
dad understood early on that from his childhood that he was unique the way he thought and his intelligence level. He recognized that I wasn't the sharpest knife in the drawer, right? Early on. But my dad helped me find things and excel in, and my mom did too, find things that I was good at, that I enjoyed, that I did well at. But dad would always hammer me about the hard work and leaning those in. And I think I've taken that work ethic from him, which has
Yeah.
been good. At other times, it's not been so good. But that's where this excellence comes from. But I very much appreciate all that hard work that he did. And then I transferred that ethic, that value to me, that virtue, if you will.
Right. You brought it up a couple times, the How is Greater Than What book. I've got it here on my Kindle, and we'll dive into that more. The thing that I think is important to unpack, because at some point, you landed in what we'll call the corporate world. And it sounds as if, from the reading in the book and some things that I've heard and studied on you, that there were a few epiphanies or catalytic events or transformations along the way,
Yeah.
whatever we
Sure.
want to call it. We could throw some
Sure.
other words at it probably, but I'd love to know. I always love to know how people end up. So you were in banking and found you a beautiful Alabama girl, and then somewhere along the way, you merged into the Coca Cola realm, which, Coca Cola, for those that are around Atlanta, is held high. It's held high in these parts. We'll just say it that way.
Maybe it's
So
idolized.
it could be, you're right. And there's some people that might still think there's a little bit of cocaine in that Coca Cola,
Mhm.
possibly. So tell
Yes.
me about how did you land there? How'd you get that gig?
I was working at Hershey Foods at the time, and we were actually living right outside of Hershey, Pennsylvania. My wife, Carla, is an only child from Alabama. And if you've ever spent time in the mid Atlantic, I won't call it, I learned when I was up there, it's mid Atlantic, not Northeast. But she really wanted to get back home. And I did too. The job situation wasn't great at Hershey at the time. And man, I tell you what, divine providence, I got connected with a headhunter. I still remember her name. Her name was Z. That was her first name. I won't give the last one, but she helped me get connected with Coke. And I went through a rigorous interview process, and they had an opening in Montgomery, Alabama, working with Coca Cola. And I was working for I was being hired by the Coca Cola company to call on and work with Coca Cola Enterprises at the time. They were the bottler. And it was a turnaround market. It was really high share, but they had had a lot of problems. And so they brought me into that. They gave us an opportunity to get back home. And so it was I tell you, that was one of the greatest days of my life, I think, Tim, when I got that phone call saying, it was right before Christmas too, and said, "Hey, Preston, you made it through. I'd love to have you. And when can we get you down to Montgomery?" So yeah, it was 2001 is when I started with Coke.
Wow. And how long had you been with Hershey? How long you were with them?
Almost 6 years with Hershey before that. So
What is one thing? Give me just a learning point or
yeah,
two with your 6 years at Hershey that you took forward with you, or something that you left behind and said, no, I'm not taking this with me at all?
there were a lot of both, man.
Good.
Um, yeah, my early career at Hershey was wonderful, and what I loved about it may seem odd to people, but I was responsible for my first couple of years actually going into grocery stores, selling chocolate or pasta or something else to a grocery store manager, building displays, working the shelf, putting new items on the shelf, selling it. It was so fun. I got to call on headquarters. At the time, there was an account called Bruno's or even Piggly Wiggly, if you've heard of that before, or Mitchell Grocery, different independents. It was fun. What I loved about it is consumer products. And everybody loved Hershey. I mean, if you love chocolate, man, most people do. And it was so cool because I could go into all those stores on my routes month after month, develop relationships, but I could see the needle move by my efforts. It was amazing when I was the one that was responsible for doing a lot of this stuff in the market, selling in the displays, making sure they got out on the floor, making sure the new products were on there. Man, I had fun doing that. As a matter of fact, our team won a President's Cup, which was the National Sales Award. Actually won those twice at Hershey before I left, but that one was just one of the most memorable 2 or 3 years I had with Hershey. And I learned the value of great management, great training, and then this idea of that do whatever it takes to get it done. I didn't slough on the routes. I did what I needed to do, did more than that. And we succeeded and did very well. And again, that's our hard work ethic that I mentioned earlier that had on it. But it was just neat to have something tangible to make happen and see it move.
My mouth waters a little bit when you bring up Hershey. My wife does some work where we're doing work right now, and I went in her office and I guess stole would be the correct word here, about a handful of Hershey Kisses today, and that's mostly what I ate today.
Great diet.
Truthfully, they're excellent.
Yeah,
There's not
sure.
much better than that. Would you say that you were on a spiritual level? Were you at a deep place during that time? Were you still
Mm.
just kind of moving along? What was your spiritual walk around that time before you came back to the Bible Belt?
Yeah, no, thank you. It's interesting. Up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, they had one evangelical Protestant church that not just one, but the one that we connected with. And we had a small group there. I spent a lot of time thinking in church and going to church, investing time with that community group. So they were great people. But when it came to transitioning and transferring my faith into the workplace, I would venture to say that most people at work probably didn't know I was a believer unless I, told them right away. But they couldn't tell by my actions the way I treated people. It was dog eat dog when I got in there, or you know, eating a candy bar and chasing that along the way. I was working on an analogy, but didn't pop out like I was hoping to. So we can cut that if you want to. Just kidding. Um, yeah. So that's kind of there was this. So if you ask me about was it shallow, I think it was a rich time in many ways from a spiritual perspective, but also very challenging because I was still. You remember I told you early on I had this behavior that I had learned while going to college and kind of what I would consider walking away and enjoying everything that others might do, and then trying to get back into that. And so I've always had this challenge of being pulled back in and trying to move forward. And I would feel like now, hopefully, I'm not as close to that as I was because it's been a journey. But I don't know if that answers your question, Tim. But yeah, that's what I guess I would really tell you that the secular and the sacred didn't really overlap. Know how
Yeah.
to link the two, and that's what I've worked really hard on over the past 10 years.
Yeah. And the reason that I love you brought up that is because I think I either read it in your book or I heard it on where you were on a podcast where I think as you moved into the Coca Cola Corporation, you were hard charger, you were working hard, but it seems as if that divide still existed
Oh yeah,
because you were extremely, and I'm going to say a couple things. I'm going to let you respond because I think this is a journey
yeah,
that many of us and our listeners go through. So I think
mhm,
it's powerful to talk about going through it and learning why how is greater than what, and
mm,
the
sure.
importance of relationship over results. Or anyway, we'll talk more about that. So you brought in hard work ethic, results driven. You kept your soft heartedness on Sundays, but then come Monday, you were going at it. Tell me more about that.
I thought that performance would get me in my career where I wanted to go. I tell people I used to have a piece of paper in my cube that had the word performance written over people. And so I considered and thought and said, okay, if I perform well, deliver results, regardless of the wake, and I saw people in the organization like this, right? I saw some role models that acted like that I would climb the corporate ladder and the people didn't matter, the collateral damage that I left behind. There's a story, though, Tim, in the book that I kind of opened with. It's about Sunset Cinema. It's a little outdoor movie theater that we started with in Coke. And it was this idea of that I was coming into this marketplace that needed to be turned around. I have just come out of Hershey Foods where I had run a couple President's Cups. I was a top performer. I got this huge new salary increase. And so I'm the man coming in. I'm not the leader of the market, but I'm the man, right? They're expecting big things. And we put this little movie theater or outdoor movie theater idea together. And I put a great plan together. Then I emailed it to the team. Things didn't go as we thought that they might. Like it rained. We were expecting 500 people, only 50 showed up. The wrong samples were there. And by the way, the movie we showed was Remember the Titans. Guess what competitor was actually on the scoreboard that was flashed on the movie screen 100,000 times? Well,
Not
it was,
Coke.
no, not Coke. It was Pepsi. And so I have all these things going through my head. I'm thinking the team has let me down. What's wrong? I'm calling the media person at home, at them saying, do your job. Then I had my VP call me over, and he's not directly my VP. I was actually working with him, but he was the guy in charge. Calls me over, and I thought, you know what? I've moved to Montgomery. This is the tipping point. I had moved from Hershey to Montgomery for a career move, right? Got all this big salary, I'd take my family back. It was a kind of a homecoming type thing. And I knew in that moment, the way I acted, something was wrong and something was amiss, and my career was on the line. But when Rick, who's the VP, ended up being my mentor, great guy, he calls me over and he goes, and there was no yelling, Tim. There was no lecture, just a quick little conversation, low voice. And then he'll say a phrase to me that I will never forget. It was, Preston, it's not what you did, it's how you did it. And I knew in that moment that that challenge was Preston Poore. It wasn't the thing that happened at the Sunset Cinema, the plan went awry. It was how I reacted to it and how I reacted to the people. And I think if you ask me what the tipping point of that was, it was a realization that if I didn't change, I was going to be changed, meaning that I was going to be out of a job. Because I remember Rick saying, I'm not sure you're the right guy for this job. Well, I'm like, oh, well, crap. I better figure some stuff out. And that was really the catalyst for me starting to consider, wait a second, these two circles I mentioned, the spiritual and the secular, why am I this way here? My family and my friends all think of me this way, but at work, I've got some work friends, but they all think I'm a hard charger and I'm a jerk. Where's the difference? And that's really the start of the journey.
That's fascinating and I think that's one of the things that I kind of drew me in to read through the book and to have a conversation with you because man, it sounds kind of familiar, Preston. I went to work for Bell South out of Georgia Tech, and
Mm,
I was known for a season. I don't want to call myself the hatchet man,
mm,
but there were two organizations that I was tasked with getting rid of.
mm,
I'm sorry to say that I was somewhat proud of that.
mhm,
You know what I mean? I mean, there
mhm.
were people involved and different things like that. And, one of them, they gave me 6 months to see what needed to be done. And I was pretty proud of the fact that within 6 weeks, I had pretty much this organization dismantled and people were moved to other places or left the company and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. And, this is what comes to mind because I believe then you started on a journey. And that's what I really want us to dig into here for the last half hour that we've got to talk. And that I think it's what you laid out in your book. But this is the vision that I had when I was listening to something you said, and also when I think about myself. In the old cartoon, the Grinch goes through this transformation where they say his heart grew 3 sizes that day. And I do, for me, believe it was a heart
Mm.
issue
Sure.
that had a lot of spiritual aspects to it. But does that resonate with you? I mean, and especially, I'm sorry, I wasn't calling you the Grinch, but
No, I'll take it. That's fine. That's good. The Jim Carrey Grinch. Thank you very much.
his heart grew 3 sizes that
Yeah.
day. And all of a sudden anyway, talk to me about that.
Yeah. I think there's this theological term called sanctification. And I found that the Lord will put you in circumstances continually, repetitively until he gets your attention. I kept bumping up against the same thing. Honestly, heart change, but it wasn't my decision to say, okay, no, I'm going to go change. It was like, wait a second, Lord, something's not right here. Something's not clicking. And I've done everything I possibly can in my power to perform, to do well, and something's not right. So I surrender to you and I need your help. I can't tell you a specific day, but I think it's that journey that I went on and that prayer and that submission where things started to change. And I think my heart grew maybe one and a half size or two and a half size. I'd love to tell your listeners, Tim, that at Sunset Cinema with that one tipping point, that everything was awesome after that. It wasn't. When you talk about a path, a journey, it was, I mean, I ran into other things where I had employees quitting on me when I became a people manager and being called a jerk and people quitting on me and all that. And then even having 360 evaluations that were extremely negative at the Coca Cola company over a 4 or 5 year span. It took time. I tell people the way I use this is people normally don't look at it this way, but I look at like Moses' career journey, our hero Moses in Exodus. In the first 40 years, he was the prince of Egypt. He was all that. Then he decided he wanted to go out and see what his people, the Hebrew people, were doing. He said, wait a second, I think I'm going to be the one to set these people free. He ends up killing somebody. The Pharaoh, God was working through Pharaoh, said, get the heck out of Dodge. Moses goes in the desert for 40 years. He's formed, he is shaped, he has to have been. He's humbled in that, right? And then all of a sudden, when he's 80 years old, about that, he's walking through and he sees this bush on fire. And he turns and looks at it, and God speaks to him and calls him in that moment to go do this. And over those last 40 years, he wasn't perfect, but he led Israel out of Egypt and into the promised land. Not that I am Moses, but my career trajectory, those first 40 years, I thought I was all that, or those like Moses. There's an in-between part where God worked in me and through me. And then there's another part on the good news is that I overcame those things and I got to do some incredible stuff. I'm still doing incredible stuff, but it's because of that moment of surrender. And I said, Lord, just change me. I need your help. And it's been a catalyst for an enzyme, if you will, for all the things that I'm doing right now.
I'm always, and that's that story of Moses, that journey is fortunately, unfortunately, the story of a lot of, it's usually men. For some reason, women get this stuff better than men do. I hate to generalize, but they lead with heart more than we do.
Yeah,
we try
sure.
to do the results and tasks and things like that. But I am incredibly thankful that it wasn't 40 years on the backside of the desert for me. How about you?
Amen.
I mean, he went through some growth and obviously, his latter years were awesome, but 40 years, we have no concept of that. I'm sure we could talk about your process as you moved along. There were stops and starts. It sounded like that began with that situation at Coca Cola at the movie theater. Were you ever aware of being in a position where your job was really in jeopardy, that you could have lost the job because of the situation or the way you were projecting yourself, the way you were acting?
Yeah, I mean, fast forward from that Sunset Cinema circumstance into, I think it was 2004, 2005 in Knoxville, Tennessee. So I got promoted. Believe it or not, I was a top performer. And so they still recognized that and wanted to pull me up. And they said, okay, and then we're going to give you a couple people to manage. And I remember sitting in a conference room, Tim, at the end of the year, about to do a year-end evaluation. And this individual that I had reporting to me, I was trying to shape and mold the individual to be just like Preston. I knew what it took to succeed. You're going to be just like me. And the individual didn't have the same skill set nor the same disposition and really didn't like me that much because of all those things. And I remember sitting at that conference room in the conference phone, and I pick up and I say, and before Tim, I could get a word in edgewise on the phone, immediately says, we don't have to do our review today. I quit. Preston, you're a jerk. And hung up on me. And that's the second person that's quit on me in probably 2 months, believe it or not. So I try to head off the issue and I go down to my manager and go to her office. I shut the door and I tell her what happened. And there was this long, pregnant pause. And then she goes, Preston, you're a top performer. We all know that. But your people skills stink. If you want to rise in this organization, you want to stay here, you're going to have to go get that fixed. And I scratched my head a little bit and I said, how do I do that? She goes, I don't care. You just go figure it out. Well, that was another journey for me, recognizing that she looked me in the face and said, you get this, but and you're a top performer, but if you don't fix these things, they're not going to want you around much longer. And so that's another tipping point for me where I decided, oh, wait a second. And the good news is that the company supported me because I came back to her with a plan and said, okay, here's what I need to do. And I actually engaged an executive coach. Her name was Jennifer. She was fantastic. And over 6 to 8 weeks, she worked with me to pull all these different things out of me, a plan and how to move forward, taught me what, or pulled out of me and showed me what my triggers were, why I acted the way I did with certain people. And that was just a wonderful time. And it was a really self-realization. All the while, Tim, I was praying, reading the Bible, leaning in and seeking God and all of that. And so it was an inward journey that I went on because of that moment. So that was another moment that hit me that you're like, okay, why do I keep running into this? And some work to do.
Right. So at some point, because you're not with Coca Cola now, right? You left there and you're
Mhm.
doing some things on your own. You got books and things like that. What was that situation leaving? And it sounds like you're doing your own thing now, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So yeah, 22 years at the Coca Cola Company, had a great career, did a lot of great things. At the end of my career, I ran into a false allegation because I have this
Mm,
desire to start this leadership training business. And I kind of tried to do it while I was still working at Coke.
mm,
And some people turned me in for saying that I was charging the company for some of the training that I was doing voluntarily, and which is just false because you have to have the managers agree to pay you. You have to have an invoice, a master service agreement, all these different things at Coke you'd have to do to get away with that. None of that existed, and never was there an intent behind it. But I left Coke after 22 years with a feeling of don't let the door hit me in the butt on the way out. I just was done. I was.
mm.
And so took me 3 years, I think. I'm just now getting over it. Not a pity story, but that was really hard when you dedicate your career 20 plus years and then to be treated that way uh, on the end. I learned a
Mhm.
lot about forgiveness, uh, to not be resentful, not to try to take revenge, and to kind of let it go. And that was a journey for me at the end of my career. So I keep telling you, I keep bumping into these things that God sticks me in these circumstances. He's doing something. And my question is never why. My question is,
Mm,
what do you want me to learn?
mm.
And that's and it's funny. You go through all of these things, and guess what happens? They end up in a book.
Yeah.
And the book's not derogatory toward Coke. It just shares my experiences on some of these things. The reason those things happen to me is that I feel like is they've given me the ability to say, okay, here's what I've learned from them. And I want to help other people with those stories, those leadership lessons that I learned, those life lessons, if you will. And only if only 100 people read the book and get a couple things out of it and say, yeah, that made a difference to me. I have to say, yeah, that's success.
Mm. So the interesting thing when people go through transitions like that, I agree with you. They sting in the moment, but 3 years out it's probably enough time. Sometimes it's even quicker than this. But Preston, I'm guessing that you're probably seeing a lot of reasons, possibly even divine, that you were moved out of that role. And not just because, somebody false allegation or anything like
Mhm.
that, but that there was a bigger picture. When I say that, what starts coming to your mind? Obviously, there's a book. We're about to dive into that even
Yeah,
more. But
sure.
what else? What are the things that never would have happened if you were still in a corporate environment?
Well, let me answer it this way if I can. The question is for me is what makes my heart sing? What was I passionate about?
Mm,
And at the Coca Cola Company, I probably wasn't the best at managing my career. But what happens at Coke is you get put into these roles like training and development. That's where they put the old horses to kind of go in the barn and pass away, kind of thing, before you leave. And there were a number of us that had been put through like that. And I knew that's what was happening to me. And so I had lost my passion for Coke. I had a huge passion for driving sales and marketing and had a lot of fun in most of my career. But at the end, it was my heart just wasn't singing anything there. And it was singing to help other people, equip them, develop. Now, funny, I just said that I didn't like my training role that I was in, but I wasn't training people on what I wanted to help them with. I wanted to help them grow their leadership skills. I wanted to help people develop discipleship skills. and walk closer with the Lord. And when I left at 55, it was clear to me what my calling was. I had this sense that I could go out and make a difference and have some fun with it. Now, I'm not lighting the world on fire, Tim. Honestly, I'm not. I'm very niched. I'm selective in what I do and who I engage, but that's okay. I'm retired. Before we got on the podcast, we were on at 6:30 tonight, right, to record this. I'm working on a board of directors for a nonprofit. I'm working on a 3-year strategic plan for them. I literally ran upstairs to get a shower in 20 minutes and get down here on the mic and camera, right, and shave. I'm thinking, man, I'm retired. Is this what retired life's like? Part of me just needs to rest a little bit, but I very much enjoy being in front of people, connecting with them, helping them, and sharing what I've learned and try to pull out of them their best to do that. So I enjoy that. It seems like you love to do that too. So
Yeah. Early in my career, I ended up in training with the Bell South Leadership Institute.
Right.
And what you said, unfortunately, is accurate. That is where they either move people or people go there to just kind of like, it's not coast,
Yeah.
but there were a lot of people at Bell South that said, man, this is what you do. That's not work. You
Yeah.
stand up in front of people and talk all day long, which
Yeah.
I would like to say it's hard. It's actually not. I enjoy it thoroughly. But there is something there with people that are wired to share information, to help people go through transformation. And it sounds like that's where the Lord is moving you and you're still there. And, I don't really even use the word retired much, but it sounds like that's the season that you're in that includes books and training and things like that, correct?
Oh, yeah. 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 This past week, I was up in New York and Manhattan speaking to the New Canaan Society about how is greater than what. Then the next day, I went across the river into New Jersey, Bergen County, New Jersey, and spoke to their chapter over there. And it's this idea that I have a keynote around how is greater than what that resonates with people. That talks about this transformation we're talking about. And it's a joy for me to get up there and share it with them because it's not about me up there, I've realized after all these years, but it's about two things. It's about God, right, and working in me and through me, but it's also those people that are listening. And one of the greatest joys I have is during my keynotes that I deliver, I don't necessarily speak the whole time. I ask a couple questions, get them engaged, and the engagement's always great. And then I love the time afterwards when people come up and say, "Hey, this resonated with me. Here's what's different," or they ask a question. That's the real time for me that makes my heart sing. And then other things that I love is being in this and then getting notes from people that had read the book 2 or 3. There's one guy that wrote me. I did a leadership workshop for a company called Ray's Coca Cola in California a few years back, and we went through some John Maxwell material, and one of them was talking about integrity. And I got a LinkedIn message, I think it was last year, from one of the guys that was in that training 3 or 4 years ago. And he just reached out and said, "I wanted to let you know how much of a difference that day, that topic, the way you covered things made a difference in my life, in my career. And I appreciate that." And when you get a note like that and you're having a bad day, that's where you take those, you write them down, you print them out, you stick them in a book. And so when you have a bad day, you can go look at all that stuff. But man, that made my heart sing, right? And my heart didn't sing when I was selling Coke Zero. Great brand. Loved it. Loved working with it. My heart didn't sing when I was selling Hershey's Kisses. Hershey's Kisses are fantastic. Like you just said, they're wonderful. I enjoyed those things, but to have that individual move from A to B, have an insight that made a difference in their life, their career, their relationship, gosh, put me there. Put me on the front. I'm all in.
Well, it's the thing that I picked up on. You've really moved from transaction to transformation
Mm.
is really what it appears. And I love your phrase that you use here, makes your heart sing. The phrase that I use is it nourishes my soul,
I love it.
which is probably the same thing.
Yeah, sure.
I want to go into how is greater than what, but this is not the first book you've written.
Mm-mm.
And when I heard the title of the other one, I was incredibly intrigued.
Mm.
And so I'd love for you to tell about that.
Sure.
And then we're going to take the last bit of our 10, 15 minutes or whatever here and
Yeah,
talk
sure.
about how is greater than what. So at first I thought it was discipline leader, but it's
Yeah.
actually discipled
Yeah.
leader. So
You
tell
have
me
to,
about
it's
it.
right on that.
Yeah.
I went through a program called Christian Leadership Concepts in the late 2000s. It was a 2-year men's discipleship program. I'm actually on the board of it right now. What an honor to do that. When I got out of that program, I had a desire to communicate, write a book. And so I took some ideas from that experience that I had and wrote this book called Disciple Leader. And the concept and idea is this, is that how do you teach it as a biblical principle and then tie it into what does it actually look like in the workplace? And so that book has 10 chapters about that. Let me give you a quick example. The first chapter is Seek. That's the title of the chapter. And it's about decision making. And so what I walk people through is the importance of or I talk about the Bible. I talk about the Holy Spirit and the roles in our lives. I talk about the importance of having a daily quiet time. And then this often missing piece for believers is what I call in the book is divine input. And so when you're making a decision, are you asking God what his thoughts are? Are you searching the scriptures to try to understand that? And then lastly, Tim, what I do is I go and say, okay, now God gave you a noodle. He gave you a noggin. I need you to think. And so I walk people and give them a framework about to make these decisions. And it's called DEB Day. It's DBDAE. And the first thing you do is define your decision. Then you brainstorm on it. Then you actually decide. And then you move into acting on that decision. And then you evaluate or examine what your decision was. That's just chapter one. And so what I try to do is to take it from a business aspect and say, okay, those two things that we just talked about, the Venn diagram, that's spiritual and the secular, how do those overlap? And how do I help you live out your faith in the workplace?
But the reason that's good is because it's going back to addressing that issue that you talked about earlier, which is Sunday and Monday are diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
You're I hate to say schizophrenic. I'm not calling you that, but that's what we are.
Yeah.
It's like we're one thing on one day, and then the next
Yeah.
day we all of a
Yeah.
sudden transform into something else, and it's not a good transformation.
Here's the root cause of that. And I love to tell people this. Barna did a study and it talks about the number of Christians that have actually been discipled. That means somebody that's come along and taught them how to pray, how to read the
0.
Bible. Well, the number is very generous, that 1 out of 5, but how to pray, how to share your faith, how to read the Bible, and the importance of being involved in community. If you don't have somebody that helps you understand those things and you start to grow in those and mature spiritually formation, how are you ever going to show up anyway at work? Right? Or if you're at work and you don't have a role model that is living out their faith in the workplace, how do you see how to do that? And so what I try to do is to say, okay, wait a second, let's start at the root cause and want to try to bring you up to speed and teach you these things to help you draw closer to the Lord and let him work in you and through you. And then if you do that, God will use you as a redemptive influence in the workplace. You'll make things better. And that's what I'm after in that. I have a vision of reaching 1 million people by 2030 with Disciple Leader. We've got some ways we're going to do that. Very excited. Thank you for asking me. That's my baby. I love my book, How is Greater Than What? The new one I wrote, but that's my baby.
Well, tell me what your, I always, as a writer myself, I'm always fascinated with what provokes someone, and I use that word very intentionally. What provokes someone to think that we've got this great idea that we can put in writing and put, 20, 30, 40,000 words, whatever, and share it with the world? What was the catalyst for you?
For that book or just for writing?
Well, let's talk about how is greater than what,
Okay.
because that's what we're discussing
Yeah,
here.
sure. It's pretty simple for me. Things can be better in the workplace. Employee engagement is low. People don't want to get into leadership. I shared a statistic when I was in Manhattan last week that only 6% of individual contributors are interested in leadership. Another study came out 2 weeks ago and said that we're going to have a shortfall of managers in 2032 of 3 million managers. That's because people don't want to be managers, right? 70% of managers are disengaged. So what happens if a manager is disengaged? Well, the team is, right? So this idea of how is greater than what is that the results matter. The what is the results, right? But how you get there, how you treat people, how you bring them along matters more than what you accomplish. And Tim, you and I both know this, that results matter. You have to look at all the college football coaches right now that are getting axed. They're not producing results, right? They're getting paid big dollars and people come along and say you can't do it. You got to produce results. But it's how you get those results, because people remember you for how you treated them over life, not necessarily what you did. People remember Preston Poore, probably, hopefully in that second half of my career, for the way I treated them. They ask questions like, do you care for me? Can you help me? Do I trust you? And hopefully they said yes to those things. And they'll remember those things. They won't remember that we won an award or whatever for that. They might talk about it, but that wasn't the big thing. So that's the reason I wrote that, because things can be better. And that's my mission through How is Greater Than What, is to try to be a redemptive influence and teach people that there's a better way.
I love titles, and you have a great title here. I'm going to hold it up for those that are, this is on my Kindle,
Yeah,
and
thank
it
you.
looks, I think it's a bright yellow.
Right here.
You could
There you go.
hold it up for people on YouTube. How is Greater Than What? That's a great title. But what I really love are subtitles. I look for subtitles because I
Mm.
think that's where we often try to get a different, I don't know, maybe the real message. Maybe publishers don't let us do certain things. Anyway, master the growth and leadership skill everyone else ignores.
Yeah.
So everyone else ignores. And, you know, this is, I'll ask this, and we've only got a few minutes left here, but the thing that's, it sounds like both of us early on in our career, we were hard chargers and could get some results, but yet we didn't have what we'll call the heart part of it.
Mhm.
And then over time, we've grown that heart. But I've known people that might have the heart, but yet they don't have the results.
Mhm.
It does require both,
Oh, it does.
correct?
Yep, it does. So one key story for me at the Coca Cola Company, I share in the book. I've been through, at least at Coke, I've been through 11 reorgs. So that's one reorg for every 2 years. I tell people it's like being a member of Congress. Every 2 years, you're up for reelection, right? Once you get reelected, then boom, you got to campaign again and get that capital before the next one happens. And I remember, Tim, being in a conference room when I was a people manager, and you had to go into the conference room. We were about to go through a reorg, and a lot of jobs are on the line, and you all have to go around and calibrate your associates and talk about things. And the thing I recognized is we went around, everybody had some type of results. Not everybody had the how. They weren't considered a leader that developed their people, cared for them, built a culture that people would want to come work with them and do fantastic things. And that was the differentiator for me. You had to have both, right? Everybody had the results. And if you didn't have results at Coke, you were exited pretty quick, right? But it's that differentiator when it came to those rubber meet the road life decisions, if you will, when you're looking at people. And if they had the how right, they normally stuck around because they all had the what. The ones that didn't have the how, they were taken out.
I think one of the things that came to me, I'll mention this, and this might be my last question. One of the things that I believe that does, Preston, is it makes a team, a group, an organization, a company, a large organization, it makes them resilient. And people that recognize short-term results or achieve those, typically they're not building something for a longer haul. And organizations that understand that,
Yeah.
they're just more resilient. So if they
Yeah.
understand this how, that it's involved in people and results, then they could withstand the storms and the winds and they're built on a firm foundation. Is that accurate?
Oh, by all means. Yeah. I mean, if you have a manager that is browbeating you over results, and you're not going to want to work with them at all. But if you have somebody and a team that builds a culture where you want to be there, where you're marching with one goal together and you're accomplishing those things and doing great things together, why not give your all and be part of that? Just the other side of that is if you're not, man, I know what it's like to be both engaged and disengaged. It's like you talked about earlier about learning some things from what not to do and then things that the good stuff. I learned a lot of things not to do from bad managers that I was disengaged from. But yeah, I think wholeheartedly what you just said is right on.
That's good. So, Preston, tell me, tell the audience, who is this book for, and then kind of go right into where they could find it and
Yeah,
all that
sure.
type
Thank you.
stuff.
Yeah. How is Greater Than What was written for emerging leaders. This is another statistic to throw at you real quick. The study I found showed that people managers are promoted to people management roles when they're on average age of 30 years old. You know how old they are when they receive leadership training? 40. There's a 10-year gap between the two. And so what I'm trying to do is to get the millennials that are, I think right now, the youngest millennial is 29, right around there. That sweet spot for me is to try to get the millennial that is trying to figure out this people leadership, the people management thing, and challenge them about where to start, and starting with your identity, moving into your purpose and meaning. And I talk about calling and vision and mission, and then ultimately significance, which is different than success. But starting points matter, and I'm trying to get their attention on it. So if you're interested in reading about how is greater than what, a few things you can do. One, you can go on Amazon to buy it. It's sold all over on all the websites that are out there. You can listen to my podcast. It's called P Cubed. You can check it out. So thank you for that cross promotion. It's interesting. I recorded the audiobook for How is Greater Than What.
Man, that was tough. So you did it? You pulled it
Yeah,
off?
yeah. 41 hours for 7 hours of total recording, and I edited it too. So I did all that. It was really hard. But it's I really enjoy that, but it's available on Spotify. It's an audiobook out there as well. So check it out. And you can go to my website. Lastly, I'll mention this. Go to PrestonPoore.com. That's Preston, Poore.com.
Yeah, very good. I've got your website pulled up here. You got some good stuff there. You got some articles and resources and things like that. So we'll include that down in the link. The book is How is Greater Than What? Master the growth and leadership skill everyone else ignores. I'll hold it up on my Kindle one more time here just so
That's
people
great.
watching can get a glimpse of it. Man, I appreciate the conversation. Thanks for listening in here at Seek, Go, Create. It's been a great conversation. Make sure you check out all of Preston's stuff. We have new episodes here at Seek, Go, Create every Monday. This is releasing, I think it's right around probably before Christmas. And so I'm hopeful everyone has a great holiday. If you're listening to it then, if you're listening to it over in the new year, that's awesome. But I got to mention one thing that's coming up big. I have been working on a huge project. I'm not going to announce it all here, but the first 3 months of 2026, I am going to be doing a project where I am going to be going through every book of the New Testament, 27 books, with some things that I have written as some immersive stories that introduce each book. And we are going to dive deep into the first century, which is where I've been hanging out for the last 2 years plus. And I'm excited to share this. We'll probably be doing about 2 or 3 episodes releasing per week. So those listening in, watch for that. It'll be on YouTube. It'll be here on the podcast platform. I'll probably do an intro episode to fill you in on all the details, but I just got to promote it because it's exciting. Preston, thanks again. Thanks for joining us, listener. We'll see you next time on Seek, Go, Create.